One song, one moment, one shot at forever, and then the music world looked the other way and never looked back. Some of them had the voice, the song, the timing, everything lined up perfectly, and it still wasn't enough to make the industry remember their name past one summer. Welcome to Rhythm and Legacy. These are the forgotten R&B one-hit wonders of the 80s. And number one has a story so painful, it will stay with you long after this video's over. Number 10, Stacy Lattisaw, Let Me Be Your Angel, 1980. She recorded her first album at 12 years old. Not 12 going on 20, 12. An actual child with an actual record deal, singing over orchestral arrangements that most grown adults could not have delivered with the same conviction. Stacy Lattisaw was born in Washington, D.C. on November 25, 1966, and was discovered performing before an estimated 30,000 people at Fort DuPont Park at the age of 11, and the president of Cotillion Records was in that crowd. Here is the detail that most people have never heard. When Stacy was just 11, a songwriter named Frederick Knight tried to sign her and wrote a song specifically for her called Ring My Bell, a teeny bopper song about kids talking on the telephone. She ended up signing with a different label, so Knight gave the song to Anita Ward, rewrote it for adults, and it became the 1979 #1 smash that everyone knows. Stacy Lattisaw walked away from the song that became Ring My Bell and still had a career. Let Me Be Your Angel came out in 1980 when she was just 13 years old and hit number 21 on the Hot 100 and number 3 on the R&B chart. Her producer, Narada Michael Walden, received so many calls after its success that Clive Davis personally called him to ask who he was, which led directly to Walden producing Aretha Franklin's 1985 comeback album. Stacy Lattisaw launched one of the greatest production careers in R&B history at 13 years old and then quietly retired from pop music in 1992 to raise her family. One of the most gifted child voices this genre ever produced. And most people today could not tell you her name. Number 9, Timex Social Club, Rumors, 1986. Three teenagers at Berkeley High School spent 3 years writing a song about gossip. They wrote it in 1984 as high school seniors, a raw, funky, point-by-point takedown of the rumor mill. And when it finally came out in the summer of 1986, it went to number 1 on the R&B chart, number 1 on the dance chart, and number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. For one summer, Timex Social Club was everywhere, and then they were gone. Producer Jay King heard the demo and arranged for them to record it at his studio, helping push it onto major R&B stations in Dallas and Houston until it caught fire nationwide. Russell Simmons, the co-founder of Def Jam Records, heard Rumors and hired Timex Social Club as the opening act for 38 dates on Run DMC's Raising Hell tour, the same tour that included the Beastie Boys and LL Cool J. A Berkeley high school group was suddenly touring with the biggest names in hip-hop. Then the business got in the way. Disputes between the band and Jay King exploded. The group fractured and disbanded almost immediately after their biggest moment. King walked away and formed a new group, changed the name, took some of the sounds, and even commissioned album artwork that looked like a direct copy of the Timex Social Club single cover. That new group was Club Nouveau. They won a Grammy in 1987 while Timex Social Club was already finished. Rumors named real people by name, including a Michael Jackson reference in the lyrics. And the song still holds up today with a rawness that most 80s R&B never dared to attempt. One summer, one song, and then the machine moved on without them. Number 8, Mary Jane Girls, In My House, 1985. Rick James put together a female group, gave them a name referencing his love of marijuana, wrote and produced every note of their biggest song, and then admitted publicly that the entire lyric was a metaphor, and we will leave it at that. The Mary Jane Girls were formed in Los Angeles in 1981, assembled by James from session singers and background vocalists as a vehicle for his songwriting and production vision. They were his protégés, his project, his sound, but the voices were entirely their own. In My House came out in 1985 and hit number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, topped the dance chart for 2 weeks, and peaked at number 3 on the R&B chart. The Parents Music Resource Center, the PMRC, the same organization that put warning labels on albums, placed In My House on their infamous Filthy 15 list of songs they found too offensive for public consumption. Being on that list in 1985 was essentially free advertising to every teenager in America, and the record sold accordingly. VH1 ranked it number 52 on their list of the 100 greatest one-hit wonders of the 80s. Recognition that came decades after the record hit, which tells you everything about how long it took the culture to fully appreciate what Rick James had made. After Rick James got entangled in label disputes in 1986, the Mary Jane Girls were pulled along with him, and the momentum simply stopped. The group never charted in the top 40 again, but that song never stopped playing at the function, and it never will. Number 7, Mtume, Juicy Fruit, 1983. He finished the album while the rest of the band went home. Then he stayed in the studio alone with a Lin LM1 drum machine, the same drum machine that was quietly revolutionizing every corner of R&B at that moment. And by 2 a.m., he had the track. He called the band back in. He called the lead singer back from London, where she was on tour with Roxy Music. Tawatha Augie flew back to New York and sang the lead vocals while James Mtume was still writing the second verse. They completed Juicy Fruit in a single night. Augie flew back to London the next morning. James Mtume was the son of saxophonist Jimmy Heath and a former percussionist for Miles Davis, a man who had played on some of the most adventurous jazz recordings of the 1970s before deciding to bring that musical intelligence into R&B and funk. Juicy Fruit reached number 1 on the R&B chart in June 1983 and stayed there for 8 weeks. 8 consecutive weeks at the top. It sold over 1 million copies without ever cracking the Pop Top 40. Epic Records initially refused to release the original version because of the lyrics. A radio-friendly version replaced one particular line, and the song became a sensation anyway. The Wrigley Chewing Gum Company sent lawyers to threaten a lawsuit over the title. James Mtume sat in the deposition, listened to the elderly attorney read back the lyric, "You can lick me everywhere," and told him plainly that the song had nothing to do with their product. The attorney turned red and dropped the case immediately. In 1994, the notorious B.I.G. sampled the instrumental version for Juicy, one of the most celebrated debut singles in hip-hop history. Mtume made a song that defined 1983, inspired Biggie in 1994, and never got another pop hit. Some songs carry an entire legacy on their own. Number 6. Club Nouveau, Lean on Me, 1987. In 1987, Lean on Me became only the 5th song in history to reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 twice, by 2 completely different artists. Club Nouveau joined a select group that before them included only the Carpenters and Bananarama as acts who had taken a beloved classic back to the top of the charts. Jay King formed Club Nouveau in Sacramento in 1986 from the wreckage of Timex Social Club, and the group's sound, hard synths, electronic drums, go-go influenced funk, did not yet have an official name. That name came later in 1987 when a music critic writing in the Village Voice called what they were doing New Jack Swing. The idea to remake Bill Withers' 1972 classic came from producers Thomas McElroy and Denzel Foster, who told Billboard at the time, "We had to make it into a new record. Otherwise, people would just say we couldn't write." Their version stripped the warmth out of the original and replaced it with cold, pulsating electronic energy. And somehow that contrast between the uplifting lyric and the icy production made it impossible to ignore. Lean on Me hit #1 on the Hot 100, #1 on the dance chart, and won the Grammy Award for Best R&B Song in 1987. Bill Withers, as the original songwriter, received the Grammy, not Club Nouveau. Within months of the Grammy win, McElroy and Foster left Club Nouveau to form their own production company. Their first major client was a new girl group they helped build from scratch, En Vogue. The lead vocalist who had sung Lean on Me left to pursue a solo career. The group that made one of 1987's biggest records could not survive its own success. At the peak of their moment, the architecture of Club Nouveau simply came apart, and the song that made them famous went on without them, still playing at every oldies station in America 40 years later. If you grew up with this music, if these songs played in your house, in your car, at somebody's cookout on a Saturday, then you already know that what made them special had nothing to do with longevity. It was the feeling. One song was enough to change how a whole generation remembered a summer. We are halfway through this list, and the top 5 carry the biggest stories. #4 has a secret that most people still do not know. #2 will make you feel something you did not expect. And #1 is going to stay with you. If rhythm and legacy means something to you, subscribe right now. These stories deserve to be heard, and we are just getting started. #5. Klymaxx, I Miss You, 1985. They were an all-female band, not a girl group assembled by a producer, not a vehicle for someone else's vision, but an actual band where the women played the instruments, wrote the songs, and produced the records themselves. Klymaxx formed in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, at a moment when that combination was virtually unheard of in R&B. The music industry was not built for them. They built it themselves anyway. I Miss You was included on their 1984 album, charted through 1985, and peaked at #5 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying on the pop chart for 29 consecutive weeks. On the R&B chart, it reached #11, and in Canada, it went all the way to #1. A ballad so quietly devastating that it has been sampled and interpolated by artists across R&B, hip-hop, and pop for 4 decades. The production is nearly bare, the vocal is everything, and that combination of restraint and emotion is exactly what makes a record timeless, rather than just popular. Their follow-up single, Meeting in the Ladies' Room, hit #4 on the R&B chart in 1985, which technically makes them more than a one-hit wonder on the R&B chart. But on the pop side, I Miss You was their only moment in the mainstream conversation, the song that introduced them to an audience that then moved on without fully understanding what it had just heard. Klymaxx was inducted into no halls of fame. They received no proper retrospective. But ask anyone who was in a car or a bedroom in 1985 what song made them feel the most, and at least one of them will say, I Miss You, before they can even think about it. #4. Rockwell, Somebody's Watching Me, 1984. His father was Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records, one of the most powerful men in the history of American music. And Rockwell, born Kennedy William Gordy, wanted nothing to do with that connection. He signed to Motown without his father's knowledge, using a stage name so nobody would realize who he was, performing interviews in a fake British accent so journalists would not connect him to the Gordy family name. He wanted to know if he could make it on his own. And then he called his childhood friend Michael Jackson. Berry Gordy had already heard the demo and told his son, in his own words, "Don't give up your day job." Rockwell kept working on the song, brought it to the Jacksons' house, performed it live 8 or 9 times at Jackson's request, while Michael called more and more people into the room to hear it. When he finished, Jackson asked who was going to sing the background vocals. Rockwell asked Michael if he would do it himself. Jackson said yes on the spot, and then called his brother Jermaine to join in. Neither of them asked to be credited on the record. Somebody's Watching Me came out in January 1984, Hit number 2 on the Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. Charted in 18 countries and sold 500,000 copies. It remains the perennial Halloween anthem, one of the most recognizable records of the entire decade, and Rockwell never had another top 20 hit. His second single barely cracked the top 40. His father, who had rejected the original demo, was standing in a room when Somebody's Watching Me came on the radio, and according to Rockwell, Berry Gordy looked at his son and said simply, "Aw man, you did it." One moment of approval from his father, one number 1 record, one song that 40 years later still makes every Halloween playlist on Earth. That was enough. Number 3, Zapp, More Bounce to the Ounce, 1980. 10 children, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, one father who built a garage studio in the backyard so his kids could practice without waking the house. That is where Zapp came from, a family in Hamilton, Ohio, a small town outside Dayton, where Rufus Troutman Sr. raised his children with the conviction that music was not a hobby but a language. Roger Troutman, his brothers Larry, Lester, and Terry formed a group under several names before settling on Zapp in 1978, named after Terry's childhood nickname. They signed with Warner Brothers with help from funk legend Bootsy Collins, who heard them and immediately made the call. More Bounce to the Ounce came out in 1980 and climbed to number 2 on the R&B singles chart. The song's bass line, built around Roger's talkbox vocal technique, the same device that manipulated his voice into that distinctive robotic melody, became one of the most sampled sounds in the history of hip-hop. Ice Cube has said publicly that More Bounce to the Ounce was the first hip-hop song he ever heard. EPMD built records around it. Ice Cube sampled it. Heavy D sampled it. The Notorious B.I.G. sampled it. The Roger and Zapp catalog was sampled over 800 times in total. 800 times. Zapp had other R&B hits, Doo-Wah Diddy, Computer Love, Dance Floor, which technically moves them beyond pure one-hit wonder status on the R&B chart. But More Bounce to the Ounce was their one moment of true crossover recognition, the record that put their sound into the DNA of every producer who came after them. Roger Troutman, the genius at the center of all of it, was shot and killed by his brother Larry in an alley behind their Dayton recording studio on April 25, 1999. A murder-suicide that ended 2 lives and left the music world without its most inventive voice. Hamilton, Ohio, renamed the street where Roger grew up in his honor in 2024. It took 25 years, but they got there. Number 2, Roger Troutman, I Wanna Be Your Man, 1987. Roger Troutman hated this song when he finished it. He recorded it in the family studio in Dayton with his brother Larry, who co-wrote the lyrics, and when the final mix was done, Roger told people he thought it was album filler at best. The executives at Warner Brothers Reprise Records disagreed completely. Label president Lenny Waronker and chairman Mo Austin told Roger that I Wanna Be Your Man was going to be the record that relaunched their dormant Reprise imprint, that it was a perfect opening act for a new era. The song Roger thought was his weakest went to number 1 on the R&B chart and number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1987. The talkbox voice that Roger used on the record, that robotic, singing through a tube in his mouth sound that he had invented and perfected over the course of a decade, influenced every major producer who came after him. Teddy Riley built New Jack Swing on top of Roger's foundation. T-Pain built his entire career on top of that. Dr. Dre and Tupac used Roger's voice directly on California Love in 1995, bringing him back into the spotlight briefly before the tragedy that ended everything. The song appeared in Love and Basketball in 2000. It has been covered by Charlie Wilson and Fantasia. It was used in Everybody Hates Chris, one song woven into the fabric of Black American culture for 4 decades. On April 25, 1999, Roger Troutman walked out of the family recording studio in Dayton and was shot multiple times by his brother Larry, the same Larry who had sat in a hotel room in Dallas and co-written I Wanna Be Your Man with him 12 years earlier. Larry drove away, crashed his car half a mile from where Roger lay, and turned the gun on himself. 3,000 people came to the joint funeral. The motive was never fully explained. Roger Troutman was 47 years old. He left behind 6 sons and 5 daughters, and the song his brother helped write, the song Roger thought was just filler, is still playing somewhere right now. That will never stop being true. Number 1. Shirley Murdock, As We Lay, 1986.
To face one simple fact.
She sang it like she had lived it, not like an actress performing a scene, like a woman who had been in that specific room, on that specific morning, feeling that specific weight. As We Lay is a song about the aftermath of an affair, about waking up next to someone you should not have been with, watching the sunlight come through the window, and knowing that what happened cannot be undone. It is one of the most uncomfortably honest songs ever recorded in the R&B genre, and Shirley Murdock sang it to number 5 on the R&B chart in 1986, with a vocal so raw and honest that the industry could not look away, and then somehow forgot her name anyway.
Morning sun.
Born in Toledo, Ohio on May 22, 1957, Shirley Murdock came up singing gospel. The church was not just background for her, it was the foundation on which every note she ever sang was built. Roger Troutman heard her perform and invited her to join the Zapp family, where she served as a background vocalist and eventually a featured artist, before signing to Elektra Records as a solo act in 1985. As We Lay was written by Larry Troutman and keyboardist Billy Beck of the Ohio Players, and produced by Roger Troutman with a quiet, almost confessional intimacy, minimal production, maximum emotion. The record climbed to number 5 on the R&B chart and number 23 on the Hot 100, and Shirley Murdock was suddenly a star.
The night away.
She never had another top 10 R&B hit. She returned to gospel music, not because the industry pushed her out, but because gospel was where she had always felt most at home. In 2003, she released a gospel album that earned strong reviews and reminded listeners who found it that the voice had never diminished. The secular world moved on. Shirley Murdock moved back to the place that had always mattered most. But As We Lay remained in the playlists, remained in the memory, remained on Quiet Storm Radio for 40 years as one of the most emotionally precise recordings this genre ever produced. One song, sung with everything she had. That was more than enough. This has been Rhythm and Legacy. If this music means something to you, hit subscribe. These stories deserve to be heard.